Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Liel Eden, and in this week's video I want to speak about one of the most famous stories in the Torah, the time where Abraham brings up his son Isaac as a sacrifice to God. Now this story is one of the most misinterpreted stories in the entire Torah and the entire Bible, and I want to explain how it is so misinterpreted. Even in the Jewish world, in the Orthodox Jewish world, it is super misinterpreted, because the truth is that God never told Abraham to sacrifice his son. If you look at the Bible, God hates child sacrifice. He despises child sacrifice. He would never tell Abraham to come and sacrifice his child. If you look throughout the Bible, God explicitly prohibits child sacrifice. If you look at Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 31, God says it's an abomination to him. You shall not do that. It's terrible in God's eyes. Do not sacrifice your children. And if you look at Leviticus chapter 18, verse 21, it says, do not sacrifice your children to the Moloch. The Moloch was this idolatrous pagan worship that would ask people would believe that this pagan idol would command you to sacrifice your children. And God says, don't do that. That is not what I ask of you. I do not want that. No matter what, you do not sacrifice your children. Children are the most precious thing there are. You do not kill them. You do not take their life. You do not sacrifice them. You also look at Leviticus chapter 20, verse 25. So we see that throughout the Torah, God prohibits child sacrifice. So how can we possibly understand that God tells Abraham to come and sacrifice his child? The truth is that he doesn't, and it's totally misinterpreted. And the first one to actually misinterpret God's command is Abraham himself. You see, Abraham lived in a time where all that anyone would do was child sacrifice. He lived in a pagan culture, an idolatrous culture, where people believed that their idols would command them to sacrifice their kids through fire, through different very satanic rituals and methods. And Abraham lived in a time where everybody was doing that. But his God, the true God, the one and only God, was against that. And he made it very clear to Abraham, we do not do that. That is not something that I condone. That is not something that I accept. That is not something that I like. I do not like child sacrifice. I despise it. God made that very clear to Abraham, which is why when Abraham received this message from God, come and bring up your child, come and sacrifice him, Abraham was totally confused. He was like, what? You're so confusing, God. I thought you said you didn't like this. Why would you come and tell me to go do it now? But Abraham was so loyal to God, sometimes to a fault. He was so loyal that he would do anything for God. But the truth is that God never asked him to sacrifice his child. Especially when you look very deeply at the verses and you analyze them, God never says sacrifice your child. If we look at the verses, God literally tells Abraham, please take your son, your one and only one whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah, bring him up there as an elevation upon the mountains which I shall tell you. So where Abraham got confused, and where most people get confused on reading these verses, is the word elevation, ole, right? In Hebrew, the verse says, Vayomer, kach na et binecha et yechidecha asher ahavta et Yitzchak, velech lecha el eretz haMoriah, ve'ahalehu sham le'olah, al achad heharim asher omar elecha. So where Abraham got confused and where most people get confused is with the word le'olah. Le'olah means elevation, right? But that word later on in the Bible is used as the term for sacrificing an animal, right? As an olah, as an elevation offering. But the word itself literally just means elevation. See, what God was actually telling Abraham is, bring your son as an elevation to this mountain. What I want to do for Isaac right now is elevate his soul. I want him to go through this elevated spiritual experience because he is the chosen child. He is the one who I am choosing to pass on this covenant with. And I want to give him this opportunity to elevate his soul. God never tells Abraham, go kill your child, go sacrifice your child. But Abraham interprets that because that was the custom of his time. That's what everybody would do. So he suddenly thought, okay, God, is telling me to come sacrifice my child to see my loyalty to him. But Abraham messed up. It's true, he made a mistake. And we see that all throughout the Bible, that the characters in the Torah, they're not perfect, not even close. They all make mistakes. They are the greats of the great, that is for sure. They are righteous souls. They are the best souls, the greatest souls who ever walked this earth. But even them, they've made mistakes because they are not God. Perfection is left to God alone. Every human is faulty, and every human will make some sort of mistake in their life. And this was one of Abraham's mistakes, and this is not known. People do not realize this, right? In the Jewish world, people love to bring the story And they love to say that Abraham was willing to even sacrifice his own child for God, as if that's something righteous to do. It wasn't. God didn't want Abraham to do that, which is why God sends a voice from heaven and says, Abraham, stop what you're doing. Stop it. You can't be doing this. Take your child off of that. I don't want you to sacrifice him. And Abraham goes and brings a ram instead, because God never wanted the sacrifice of Abraham's son. God was never looking for that, because God despises child sacrifice. We see it in the rest of the Torah. We see it in the rest of the Bible. God prohibits it. So if he prohibits it, he's not going to command Abraham to do it. Abraham misinterpreted it. And so do so many people today. And for generations, people have misinterpreted the words that God gave to Abraham. God said, take him as an elevation, right? Elevate him. Bring him to this mountain. I want him to have this deeper connection with me. I want to give him this experience of elevation. But God never says sacrifice your child. And we see later in the text where Abraham is setting him up on the altar. And he's about to take the knife and he's about to kill him. The angel of God comes and says, Abraham, Abraham. And Abraham says, here I am. What's going on? I'm about to do what you commanded me to do. And the voice says, do not stretch out your hand against the child, nor do anything to him. For now I know that you are God-fearing, since you have not withheld your son, your only one, from me. Now, people interpret this verse as saying, okay, God was just trying to see if Abraham was willing to sacrifice his child. Now that he saw he was willing to sacrifice his child, he didn't need him to sacrifice his child anymore. No, the truth is that God never wanted the child sacrifice, right? It was nice to see Abraham's level of loyalty. That's obviously not a fault, right? But that doesn't mean that that's what God wanted of him. So God was not looking for the child sacrifice. And we actually see that after this moment in the Torah, Abraham's life kind of gets a little bit depressing. So we never hear God speak to Abraham again in the Torah. This is the last time he has an interaction with the Creator. After this, Sarah dies. He gets back home from what he did, from about to sacrifice Isaac, but the angel stopped him from doing so. He gets back home and he finds that his wife is dead. And we don't see him really have any relationship with Isaac anymore, right? It says that Abraham returns with the two lads that were waiting for him right off of the mountain, but he doesn't come back with Isaac, right? Isaac stays kind of isolated with God. You have to know that Isaac was 37 years old at the time that the sacrifice was going on. So we see that Abraham kind of enters into this period of isolation after this moment. But he starts realizing, oh my gosh, God would never ask me to sacrifice my child. God hates that. I should have known. I misinterpreted what he was asking me to do. And so God and him, there's not interaction between them again. Sarah dies. And Isaac and Abraham kind of, they don't really have conversation after this. We see that Abraham then looks for a wife for Isaac, but we don't see so much communication between them. So why am I making this video? Because I learned this myself and it never resonated with me. Every year you hear the same story from religious leaders, from rabbis. You hear Abraham, even though he lived in a time where child sacrifice was terrible, if God asked him to do it, he would do it anyway, because he would do anything for God. If he would do anything for God, then you should do anything for God. No, that is not what the Torah is telling you. That is not it. God will never ask of you of child sacrifice. And if he does, you don't do it. You don't do it because the true God of the world would not ask of you to do that. He prohibits it. It's an abomination to him. He despises it. And a bigger lesson is that, the Torah, I always say this, but it's not a history book. It's an application for all of time, okay? It applies to all of human history. And we see today that maybe child sacrifice in its literal sense doesn't exist so much today. But there is different ways to see how children are, quote unquote, being sacrificed in today's modern world, where children are being corrupted. Their minds are being corrupted. Children are abandoned. They're left to systems that corrupt their minds. They're left to these devices that corrupt them. You give over your child to these false ideologies. And in a sort of way, it's like giving them over. So everything in its own level, obviously you're not killing your child, but there's a part of them that with the way that kids are raised today, there's a part of their soul that's being taken from them. When you raise a child to not know God, to not live in a healthy way, then you're making them suffer. And you see children today. They're not happy. They're not okay. Child suicide rates are very high. Children are in drugs, drinking, promiscuity. They distract themselves all day on technology. They're depressed. They're filled with anxiety. That's not normal. Children are unhealthy physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. That is not normal. And no, is it child sacrifice in a literal sense? No. But are you taking a piece of their light away from them by the life that we are providing to children today? Yes, I do believe so. Children deserve better than what they are getting in the modern world today. Children's childhoods are being taken away from them. Children's innocence are being taken away from them. The evil forces go after the number one light in this world, and that is the children. Children are the most precious thing in God's eyes. So I wanted to share this for many reasons. Number one is because people totally misinterpret this, and they say this story with so much confidence that Abraham would sacrifice his child. No, Abraham actually made a mistake. God didn't want him to do that. God did not want him to do that. God wanted him to do that, he would have let him sacrifice him. Except God said, stop what you're doing. Don't kill him. And Abraham immediately brought a ram. Okay, and God never says the words, come sacrifice your kid. He says, come elevate him. Isaac was supposed to be elevated on this mountain, not sacrificed. Abraham misinterpreted, and so did a ton of his descendants, because most Jews actually view it as Abraham did the right thing, except he didn't. You see it in the aftermath. He kind of has this moment, the rest of his life is a little bit depressing. His wife dies, and he just has to sit with the mistake he made, because it was a mistake. It's an abomination to Hashem to sacrifice your children. Children are the most prized possession, and to give them over to be raised by corrupt systems, it's a form of sacrifice. And I hate to be so blunt, but it breaks my heart to see the state of children today. And yeah, this is quite controversial, and I tend to make quite controversial topics, but that's just because I know people are going to disagree, but it's just, it needs to be said. Somebody needs to say it. This is not what God intended. And people need to really read the verses. God never says to sacrifice your child. And let's say God appears to you one day and says to sacrifice, you don't sacrifice. God doesn't want child sacrifice. God is a God of life. He does not like death. Okay? So death is on the dark side. Death is evil. Death is bad. We don't like death, let alone when it comes to children. So don't sacrifice your kids in any level or shape or form. Protect your children. Keep them safe. Keep their purity alive. Keep their innocence alive. And give them life. Wish you guys all the best. Let me know your thoughts. And this is why it's so important to read the Bible in its original Hebrew. Because when you translate this verse, the translation says that God told Abraham to come sacrifice his kid. But the literal Hebrew says le'olah. Olah literally means elevation. Le'aleh, to elevate, okay? It doesn't mean sacrifice. Abraham interpreted that, and so do many people. But that's not what God intended. That's why God tells him, stop it. Don't sacrifice him. Put the knife down. That's not what I wanted. I wanted to elevate him. So yeah, wish you guys all the best. Let me know what you thought. And yeah, see you guys in the next video.